Did you know that Nobara might be a Gojo? Or that Yuji's birth was made with a binding vow? Or that Sukuna might just be the combined incarnation of 3 different gods? Well, these are just 3 of the 9 insane theories we are going to be talking about today. And if these sound crazy to you, just wait until you see what else we talk about. Like how Mahito was supposed to be the next Sukuna. When it comes to powerful cursed spirits, there are a few that surpass Mahito. His technique was basically made for killing humans, and he takes immense joy in the act of killing, as well as the act of self-exploration. Only days after his birth as a cursed spirit, he was on equal footing with a strong grade 1 sorcerer. And just a few days after that, he developed his own domain expansion as well, growing at a rate that surpasses pretty much everyone else in the series. And his moral philosophy grew just as quickly, as Mahito believes that life itself holds no meaning or value, that it's best to live solely under your own morals and interests. Eat when you want, kill when you want, live how you want. This mindset and the desire for growth is very reflective of Sukuna. Both live as they want with disregard for the interests of others. According to Sukuna, this is a mindset that only the strong can truly understand, and it's implied that this mindset is required to become the strongest, which is why Gojo and Kashimo could never reach Sukuna's level. Mahito and Sukuna share a very similar moral compass, but it doesn't stop there. On top of this, when we look at the advantages that Sukuna gains from his deformed body, those being able to chant without worrying about air capacity thanks to having multiple mouths, and being able to use hand signs while casting techniques thanks to having 4 arms, we can also see that these traits can be copied by Mahito thanks to the seemingly endless amount of ways that he can manipulate his own body. In fact, he could even create more arms and more mouths to further push his advantage in Jujutsu. So both have similar morals and can gain an advantage in Jujutsu in a similar way, but there's one more detail that really seals the deal on Mahito becoming the next Sukuna. Early on into the series, it's established that the world of Jujutsu constantly balances itself for strength. So when there are stronger sorcerers, stronger cursed spirits get created. In season 1, Gojo stood unparalleled when Mahito was born, implying that Mahito's intended creation was to become an equal to Gojo in order to balance the scales of Jujutsu. But considering how out of balance they were in the first place, maybe Mahito could have become even stronger, surpassing Gojo to become the equal to Sukuna. Now obviously this didn't happen because the greatest mother-son duo had different ideas, but that doesn't mean it wasn't supposed to happen, it just never came to fruition. The next theory is that Nobara is a Gojo. This one is pretty simple and honestly pretty loose. The basic theory is that Nobara is related to the Gojo clan in some way, similar to Yuta, except in this case they share a close relative rather than a distant one. A lot of people found it bizarre that the Gojo clan only had 1 representative, as both the other clans, Kamo and Zenin, had a number of sorcerers appear throughout the show. This theory basically states that Nobara's family is a split off of the Gojo clan, and it mainly stems from 3 different factors. First of all, Gojo and Nobara do share some physical similarities, not in terms of their hair or eye color, but instead in terms of their face shape, mouth shape, and eye shapes, which are pretty similar. On top of this, they also share some very similar mannerisms and an interest in shopping, especially upscale clothing. This second point is pretty weak, as there are plenty of people who like to shop, but the third one is a lot more grounded. It's stated fairly early into Jujutsu Kaisen that Nobara learned her technique from her grandmother. What's interesting about this is that most techniques are not learned, they are simply bestowed upon a person by chance, with one main exception, that being inherited techniques. This has led some people, mostly crazy people on Twitter, to believe that Nobara is using an inherited technique that once belonged to one of the big 3 clans. And because of the similarities between Gojo and Nobara and the lack of Gojo clan representation, they think Nobara might be a descendant of a branch of the Gojo clan that either left for a peaceful life or was outcast for one reason or another. Unfortunately, both of the people in this theory are dead, so it's unlikely we'll be getting any confirmation or deconfirmation on this theory anytime soon. But we might be close to some confirmation on the next one, which is a theory on the origin of Sukuna's title as the Disgraced One or Fallen One. To start, we have to identify what exactly it means to be disgraced. In general, in order to be disgraced, you first have to be worthy of being considered graced, or just worth something. You cannot be a disgrace if you were never worth anything in the first place, which is why me and most of you are disappointments, not disgraces. This concept of being disgraced is especially interesting when we consider his relation to Angel and the Angels. Angels seemed to be a faction within Jujutsu that existed during the Heian era, as they fought alongside the Abe clan against Sukuna. This faction of Angels implies that our Angel is just one of many people. Perhaps she was the sole survivor of the onslaught onslaught and went to Kenjaku for reincarnation to get a second chance at finishing what her faction couldn't. But that's a theory for another day. The theory is that Sukuna was originally one of these angels and would later fall from grace or be disgraced for one reason or another. Perhaps his nature and selfishness led him astray from the angels, or perhaps his actions were deemed disgraceful. A prominent theory within this theory is that Sukuna was disgraced for his cannibalism, or that he was born as a twin similar to Maki and Mai, and was disgraced after killing and eating his brother. There isn't a lot of evidence to prove this because our information on the Heian era is still pretty minimal, but that also means there's not a lot of evidence to disprove it, so we're running with it. Our next theory is that Yuji was made with a binding vow. This one comes from Similar West on Reddit, and it only requires one assumption, that Yuji's father was a sorcerer in addition to his mother. This assumption can actually be made pretty easily, as Jin made no comment or even acknowledgement of how his former wife now has stitches across her forehead, and it's even weirder to think that he was just fine with banging his dead wife's now alive body if he wasn't a sorcerer, potentially one that already knew Kenjaku from some place or some time. Anyway, the basis of this theory is that Jin and Kenjaku made some sort of binding vow for Yuji, and it relates to the Culling Games, as Yuji was listed as a Culling Games player before even entering any colony, and he also seems to be the only character capable of suppressing Sukuna. Both of these insinuate that Yuji's birth had some sort of conditions behind it, like a binding vow. Similar West seems to think that this binding vow was made so that Sukuna could be killed and the Culling Games could be ended, because if the games aren't ended, Kenjaku cannot fulfill his end of his binding vow, and we all know that can't be good. Next we have the godly Sukuna theory. This theory is kind of insane, and its basis is that Sukuna's mind, body, and soul are all based on 3 different malignant gods across Asian mythology. The first one is Mara, an evil god from Buddhism who attempted to draw Prince Siddhartha away from enlightenment. In the myth, Buddha saves Siddhartha from Mara, and he goes on to achieve enlightenment. In some ways, this myth is similar to Sukuna's fight against Gojo. Both are considered by themselves and society to be higher beings, and at the start of the fight, Gojo is fighting for the future of his students and Jujutsu. He has a higher goal, and defeating Sukuna is necessary in completing that goal. However, as the fight goes on, Gojo gets tethered back to Earth by his enjoyment of the fight, to the point that he's willing to forego the well-being of Megumi, who was one of the students he was trying to create a better future for. This essentially means that Gojo failed to achieve enlightenment because he put his enjoyment of the fight before saving Megumi, and this implication is actually reinforced by the kanji that Sukuna uses in this panel. While Banpu is translated as ordinary, the direct translation is failed to achieve enlightenment. This is all to say that Sukuna's motivations and psychological way of fighting are very similar to that of Mara from Buddhism, so his mind is like Mara. His body, on the other hand, is very obviously inspired by Shiva from Hinduism, who has multiple arms, multiple eyes, and makes use of a trident. He's known as both the destroyer within the Trimurti and the supreme lord of all of Hinduism, so he has the mind of Mara, the body of Shiva, but what about his soul? Well, it's possible that Sukuna has the soul of Enma, the arbiter of hell in Buddhism, and this is likely where his curse techniques come from, as they are closely related to the soul. In Buddhism during the Tang Dynasty, it is explained that there are 134 total hells in Buddhist hell, but it has since been simplified down to just 18. What's interesting is a number of these hells are pretty similar to Sukuna's technique. There's the Hell of Dismemberment, which very closely resembles Dismantle in name and definition, the Hell of Skinning, which is an action not unlike cleaving, and there's also the Hell of Mountain of Knives, which could be said to resemble Malevolent Shrine. But what about Open? Well, this is where it gets interesting, because there is a Hell of Pit of Fire, which seems pretty similar to the Open technique we have seen. Because the human brain is limited in the number of curse techniques it can hold, it could be possible that the Open technique is used to literally open the gates of hell and allow Sukuna to use a technique from hell that is not etched into his body. There's even a realm of hell that very closely resembles another sorcerer's technique, but we'll talk about that one in a little bit. We also know that the Japanese Vengeful Spirits were real in Jujutsu Kaisen 1,000 years ago, as Michizane has been mentioned a number of times throughout the show, which means it's not out of the realm of possibilities to have other entities at play, like Hindu and Buddhist gods. Maybe Sukuna did a favor for all of them and via a binding vow gained their resemblance, or maybe because of his cannibalism, he consumed a part of these 3 gods and took a piece of their identity with him. Who knows? So what was the other realm of hell that resembled a curse technique? Well, it was the Hell of Mountain of Ice. Which brings us to our next theory. Uraume is the offspring of Sukuna. This theory aims to explain why Uraume and Sukuna are so close, as their relation has been a mystery since it was revealed that the duo was connected. The basic theory is that Sukuna sought to gain permanent access to another one of the abilities related to the realms of hell, either to bolster his own strength or for his own convenience. The reason he would pursue the Hell of Ice is because it was extremely hard to store meat 1,000 years ago, and being able to freeze it would help him immensely with his cannibalism. So he bore a child and imbued them with the ice curse technique from hell, in the hopes that imbuing a child with a curse technique he did not possess would give Sukuna the technique as well. This would not happen, but Uraume would be born and would be loyal to Sukuna, giving him the assistance he needed. Another possibility is that he worked with Kenjaku to create a child guaranteed to have this technique, since Kenjaku seems to have a history of messing with babies. Not like in the weird way, well, I guess it is still weird, but you know what I mean. This would be Kenjaku's first successful attempt at creating a person with intent. If Uraume did originate from one of the realms of hell, it would explain why she has such a strong curse technique and such a seemingly large cursed energy pool. Now obviously there is no basis for this to be true, and it takes an entire other theory just to even scratch the surface at this one, but it could still be possible. Our knowledge on Uraume is extremely shallow, much like me, because I'm about to shill for subscribers. Let's just be honest, we all love online validation, and I am no different. Watching that little number tick up day by day is extremely cathartic and is unfortunately directly linked to my self-worth. So if you like the content or just want to help my self-confidence, please consider subscribing. It would really mean a lot to me, and you really have no reason not to. Anyway, Yuki Tsukumo might be Buddha, or at least that's what this theory suggests. This theory is also related to Hindu mythology, as Sukuna is not the only character to take inspiration from the religion. Another one is Tengen, who bears a loose resemblance to Vishnu visually, and shares the trait of immortality. Vishnu had 10 primary avatars, much like how there were 10 plasma star vessels for Tengen. The 9th avatar for Vishnu is Buddha, and as I'm sure you can guess, the 9th plasma star vessel is Yuki Tsukumo. Now this on its own could just be a coincidence, but it becomes more concrete when we look at the similarities between the 10th avatar and the 10th plasma star vessel. Khalil is said to be the final prophesized incarnation of Vishnu, and is said to usher in a new period of existence. While Riko was more than just prophesized, she was the final plasma star vessel before Tengen's ascension, and her death did usher in a new age, as according to Yuki, that's when things began to shift and get weird. Beyond this though, there isn't too much of a basis for this theory. There's kind of a connection between Garuda and Vishnu, as Vishnu's mount was named Garuda, but that's really as deep as it goes, so let's move on to our penultimate theory, which is that the big three vengeful spirits will play a part in the merger. For those who don't know, in Japanese mythology there are 3 vengeful spirits that are supremely powerful above the other spirits. Those are Sugawara no Michizane, Emperor Sutoku, and Taira no Masakado. These 3 also exist in Jujutsu Kaisen, with Michizane being the most prominent as he's an ancestor of the Gojo clan and Yuta, and his clan also fought Sukuna back in the Heian era. Taira no Masakado and Emperor Sutoku, on the other hand, haven't really been seen, but if I remember correctly, both of them are responsible for the forming of the Zenin and Kamo clan. This has led some people to believe that the 3 vengeful cursed spirits and Sukuna will all be used at the 4 Jokai across the country in order to complete the merger, and that this is actually why Kenjaku needed Sukuna to be alive in the modern day, and that fulfilling the calling game might actually be the binding vow between Sukuna and Kenjaku. And the final theory that we have today is that Mahito was the key to ending conflict between humans and cursed spirits. Before we can understand this, we first have to understand the cursed realm, which is the realm that cursed spirits are born from when they become strong enough to bridge into the real world. This realm constantly exists as a space inaccessible to humans, but also one that exists everywhere at all times. It is imperceivable, but it does exist, like some colors on the light spectrum. As far as we know, there is only one character confirmed to be able to switch between the two, and that's Kenjaku, but it's likely that Mahito had the potential to do this as well, or he was at least knowledgeable on the realm. Before Jogo's death, Mahito is described as a mirror for humans. While on the surface this can be interpreted as Mahito being death itself, or just Mahito being the fear of humans by humans, we can go deeper. A mirror is an exact reflection of whatever is looking into it. Whether good or bad, if you're staring into it, you will see yourself staring back. But Mahito is a curse, not a human. So while Mahito is a mirror for humans to humans, he is also a mirror for curses to himself. This gives Mahito the unique perspective of understanding both humans and curses in a way that very few can. It's a part of what makes him so hateable on the show, but it's also the key to ending the conflict between cursed spirits and humans. Humans see curses as nothing more than beings that ramble nonsense and prey on the weak, and curses see humans as nothing but liars and falsities. A being that could understand the flaws of both would be imperative to both sides coming to a sort of understanding and seeing eye to eye on a lot of their issues. Now obviously this wouldn't actually actually happen because Mahito hated humans, and as we stated earlier, he only lived for himself. Plus he's dead now anyways, so it's not like there's any peace that can happen between the two factions, and I feel like we've kind of moved on from cursed spirits in general anyway, but it's still interesting to think about how Mahito could have turned out if he held a different philosophy. Let me know what you think of these theories in the comments down below. Some of these were kind of off the wall, but sometimes those can be the most fun theories. Plus they were supposed to be mind-bending. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Or will I?